is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. Welcome to the Duck Milk Prod YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I am calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the negative reviews written by top critics from Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. This is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions, but rather serve as a study of art criticism and how we discuss film. I'm hoping that this endeavor will encourage all of us to be better consumers of cinema, myself included. This week, I'll be reading through a review from the Chicago Tribune, I believe it is, titled Batman v Superman Review, Yawn of Justice, written by Michael Phillips. You can click on the link in the video description below if you'd like to follow along and read it for yourself, and I encourage you to do so. If Michael should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible, and I would ask that anyone watching live or posting in the comments would do the same. I'm simply taking a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view, given that these reviews were used by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. Due to the poor reviews for Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were changed for Justice League and ultimately led to the destruction of the Snyderverse as we typically know it, based on the idea of the 5-film arc that Zack Snyder wanted to implement. Before I get into Michael's thoughts, though, I'm sure there are some viewers who might think, Rebecca, this is a film critic for a major news outlet who is included on Rotten Tomatoes. Who cares what you have to say about this? So I have a little video that I can play to fill you in on some of the things that I can bring to the table in terms of art criticism. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, that was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at @TheDerbyKid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life, I have played piano, handbells, clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it, actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. All right, now that we have gotten that out of the way, let's get into this week's review, which comes from Michael of the Chicago Tribune, and the title is Batman v Superman Review, Yawn of Justice. I actually appreciate the word play here on dawn and yawn. It's still a little lazy in that it seems to repeat everything other critics are writing about, namely the length of the film. But the title is at least making something of an effort to be creative, so I'll give it points for that. I would maybe have edited the way it was written a little bit differently. I probably would have capitalized review. I would have capitalized justice, the J in justice, but that's just nitpicking. So I'll have to give it points for trying to be creative. Some of these review titles don't really make an effort at all. They just title it Batman v Superman Review. So at least this one tried to do a little wordplay. So I appreciate that right off the top. So let's get into the actual merit of the review. So it starts off, quote, a near total drag, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice plays like a loose, unofficial $250 million remake of The Odd Couple, in which Oscar and Felix are literally trying to kill each other. I kid, a little. This certainly is not true of director Zack Snyder's solemn melee. The movie does not kid. It takes the mournful death knells of the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy and cranks up the volume, while ignoring any of the visual strengths and moral provocations found in Nolan's best work, unquote. I have to wonder here, just right off the beginning of the review, why Michael here classifies Batman v Superman as a near total drag and not a total drag. And there's a difference. A near total drag means that it's not fully a total drag. It's not an all the way drag. So I'm very curious as to what keeps it from being a drag all the way through. Will he bring up things that he thinks that the film does well? We'll have to keep reading in the review to see if that comes up. But I just think that's really funny. I'm surprised that he didn't just write it off as a total drag. It's a near total drag. So I guess positive points there from Michael of the Chicago Tribune. Also, I can kind of understand the choice of using The Odd Couple as a comparison here because they are seemingly two different characters forced to have interactions. You have that with Oscar and Felix of The Odd Couple, which was a play and a film and a TV show. So the comparison here of Oscar and Felix with Batman and Superman, I can see the temptation to use it. But BBS doesn't play Batman and Superman like Oscar and Felix. It plays them as a hero and a villain, with Batman actually being the bad guy for most of the film. They're also in different genres. Dawn of Justice is a dramatic film, and The Odd Couple, no matter if it was the play, the film, or the TV series, is usually played for laughs. It's supposed to be funny that these two guys are so different. Ultimately, I think The Odd Couple mention in this review is extremely superficial, just to try and crack a joke to make fun of a film that Michael didn't like. So it really doesn't have anything really to do with the merit of the film. It's just trying to crack a little joke here at the beginning to get you on to get you on Michael's side. Michael also writes, quote, it takes the mournful death knells, unquote. Well, yeah, because it's a film that opens and ends with a funeral. It's intentional that it focuses on death. There's a reason why part of the film is mournful and that there's death knells in it. Superman dies in this movie. It's partially about death and partially of how you maybe as a character like Bruce Wayne finally gets over his parents' death, specifically his mother, how he comes to term with it and finds catharsis in it. And how characters have to deal with the death of Superman. That's what the story is telling. So it's actually very appropriate that it has mournful death knells in it. So I don't know why that's a critique from Michael here. That's intentional, and it actually reinforces the story that the film is telling. Michael also writes, quote, ignoring any of the visual strengths and moral provocations found in Nolan's best work, unquote. This is not the first time this has happened in one of these reviews, but I can't get over that someone would actually write something like this in a serious thought, and I'm supposed to care about it. Uh, just being honest here, it's hard for me to get over. Saying Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice lacks visual strengths and moral provocations. That's just a flat out lie because it accomplishes both of those things at such a high level. The visuals are amazing and beautiful, and there's a lot of discussion about morality and how we determine what's good in BVS. So I personally, I just think that's a flat out lie. Maybe Michael didn't go into that when he was watching it, but that's just not true. And as much as I love Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, I do. I love it so much. Uh, Wally Pfister, the cinematographer on those films, and on other Nolan films, he's one of my favorite cinematographers. I follow him on Instagram, and I think he's done some really beautiful work. But there is a style that comes from the Zack Snyder, Larry Fong team up that those films don't even come close to coming to with BVS, because there is a very specific auteur style that's very highly stylized, and that's just completely different from the Dark Knight trilogy. It's intentionally so. They're two totally different universes, two totally different interpretations of the character of Batman, of the DC universe. They're intentionally different. It's from the perspectives of different filmmakers, so of course they're going to be different. But in my personal viewpoint, in terms of what I like better, I like the Zack Snyder, Larry Fong visual style, just because I think it's really beautiful, and it brings, for me, the story really, it internalizes it for me. That I can really get involved and invested in it a little more, because the visuals do a lot of the storytelling. But that doesn't mean that Wally Pfister in the Dark Knight trilogy were bad. It's just different. So I don't understand first why someone would say that Zack Snyder and his visuals are not any good, and that his storytelling doesn't bring up any discussions on morality when it does both of those things. And I also don't understand why you would compare these two filmmakers and cinematographers and visual storytelling methods when they're completely different films, and intentionally so. And also, Christopher Nolan, these reviewers do this all the time, and it drives me crazy. There's really no reason to bring him up in these film reviews. Christopher Nolan was an executive producer on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and that's it. And I really think he only did that because he wanted to keep Warner Brothers off of Zack Snyder's back. I really think he was just kind of the middleman there to protect Zack Snyder from BVS being meddled with, because BVS and Man of Steel were pretty much untouched for the most part, except for BVS had to cut 30 minutes initially. Except for the extended cut, it was they were added, the 30 minutes were added back in. But I think for the most part, Christopher Nolan was able to protect Zack from some of the stuff that would come later. And so I think that's really the biggest input he probably had in the film. But other than that, he's not the director. He didn't write the script. For them to bring him into these reviews is just completely unnecessary, and it doesn't actually engage with the merit of the film. So I think it's really strange that they do that. So I just want to mention that here, because it just comes up all the time. And I know I've repeated these things in these live streams that we've done, but it keeps coming up. So I keep having to address it. So I'm sorry for people who watch these all the time and get tired of the Christopher Nolan mention, because I do too. I get very, very tired of it. This is not a Christopher Nolan film Why is he in these reviews? Why is the comparison to the Dark Knight trilogy here, other than both of the films, both the Dark Knight trilogy and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice have the character of Batman in it. That's it. So it's bizarre to me. Okay, so also both Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan have made excellent films based in the world of DC Comics, but they have different styles and different interpretations of the characters, and it seems strange to me that they would continue to be compared in these reviews. They were intentionally trying to do new and different things with the character from their perspectives as filmmakers. They're different filmmakers. They care about different aspects of the story and different aspects of the characters. So of course their films are going to be different, and they should be different. And to me, it's honestly just such a waste to compare them, because ultimately it means nothing. What do you get out of comparing them? Not much. It's not it's not it doesn't add any value to your appreciation of the Dark Knight trilogy. It doesn't really add any I maybe I shouldn't speak for everybody here. It doesn't add anything to my enjoyment of the Dark Knight trilogy to make that comparison. It doesn't add any value to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice to make that comparison, because ultimately it doesn't matter. We're talking about the merit of a film, whether we're talking about one of the films in the Dark Knight trilogy or we're talking about Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. As a reviewer, I think your job, if you are going to be a reviewer, is to review the film from the first frame of the film to the end of the end credits. That's it. Any review that does something outside of that, I think, is really stretching what they're actually supposed to be doing and are actually avoiding discussing the film. I find that a lot in these reviews, that they want to talk about everything else, the box office return, the budget, how long it is, but they don't actually want to engage in discussing the actual merit of the film, and they prolong it and prolong it and prolong it until they actually have to eventually down on into the review. But I just think that's really funny that they don't actually want to get into the meat of the film. So that's just my personal opinion after reading so many of these, that seems like what they're trying to do here. Because we're 2 paragraphs into this review and Michael hasn't really even addressed the merit of BVS as a film with any seriousness or professionalism. 2 paragraphs in. Not much to do with the actual merit of BVS. But we did get that great Christopher Nolan mention for some reason. Okay, continuing on. So Michael writes, quote, "Nothing I have to say about Snyder's technique will mean anything to anyone at Warner Brothers if Batman v Superman does what it needs to do, i.e. gross $1 billion or more worldwide, thus setting up ready-made audiences for a chain of interrelated DC Comics movies in production and pre-production. The actors in Snyder's 2.5-hour lesson in jaw-jutting and awkwardly framed handheld camera work save what they can, where they can. I particularly enjoy Jeremy Irons' Alfred, who clearly should be running the show rather than his boss, zillionaire 3-day stubble boy Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, played by Ben Affleck. Amy Adams as Lois Lane remains an asset as well." So I appreciate here that Michael is able to talk about the things that he thinks were good. He liked Jeremy Irons as Alfred and Amy Adams as Lois Lane. So I guess those were some of the things that kept the film from being a total drag. It's a near total drag, but not a total drag. So I guess those are some of the elements in the film that actually were positive here. I do think it's really interesting, and I think Michael's giving away the game here because he writes, "Nothing I have to say about Snyder's technique will mean anything to anyone at Warner Brothers." Why would he write that as a film reviewer? Why would he write that? Why would Michael be wanting anything he has to say to affect Warner Brothers and how it handles films based on DC? Shouldn't his job as a film critic be to share his thoughts on a film? That's your basic job as a film critic, is you're sharing what you think about the film. Why would what you think about the film sway anything about the movie studio and the decisions that they make regarding a cinematic universe? Why would he write that? Why would his intention be that of influencing a movie studio? I think he's just straight up telling us in the review that he hopes what he says about the film in this review is going to somehow sway Warner Brothers to change something. I think that's really interesting. Very honest of Michael from the Chicago Tribune here to write something just that brazen in this in this review. He also mentions that Batman v Superman has to gross $1 billion or more worldwide. Why? Well, why does it have to do that? So it's so rare that films gross $1 billion worldwide. It's very rare when you actually look at how many films come out every year and have come out since the dawn of filmmaking. Making grossing over $1 billion is so very rare. So why? Who said it had to gross $1 billion? Who said that? I'm very curious. Did he hear that from a Warner Brothers executive? Did he just hope to write that in his review to sway Warner Brothers to say, "Oh well, it didn't gross $1 billion," and Michael from the Chicago Tribune said that it should. I guess maybe we should change course. That's really, really bizarre to me. Again, I just want to reinforce that this is not engaging with the merit of the film at all to talk about how it needs to gross $1 billion. And just as a reminder, it grossed about 873 million, which is very close to a billion. So it didn't hit a billion, but it got pretty close. And I think till this day is still one of DC's highest grossing films, not the highest grossing, but one of the highest grossing. So I just think it's interesting that that all of this is happening in this one paragraph. So Michael here, I think, is giving away his intention here. Also, Michael wants to discuss Zack Snyder's technique, but then refers to it as, quote, awkwardly framed handheld camera work, unquote. Now, I understand if someone just doesn't like Zack Snyder's approach to DC characters or the stories he wants to tell. That's it's a taste thing. Maybe you're not really into it. I understand. But critiques about his visuals are so empty to me. What awkward frames is he actually referring to? One could actually pause Dawn of Justice at any given point. You could do that. Try it when you when you're finished with this live stream, or you could do it during the live stream. You want to? I can't tell you how to live your life, but you could watch it, Dawn of Justice, go through it, the theatrical version or the extended cut. Your pick, your choice, and just pause it at any point in the film, and you're probably going to get a frame that you could print out, put in a picture frame, and hang on your wall, and somebody's going to come to your house and think it's a work of art. You're probably going to be able to pick a frame like that because it's so well done. So I think it's very strange to me that that Michael wants to talk about technique and filmmaking technique and camera work, but he doesn't actually reflect what's actually being shown on the screen within the film. If you boil down Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice to awkwardly framed a handheld camera work, I'm not going to believe that you actually watched the film. I'm just not. I'm just not going to believe that you actually watched the film. I am not a camera expert. I'm not a cinematographer myself, but I am a camera operator. I do video for my day job. I've trained in camera work. I have been part of live productions. I'm an amateur photographer. And when I watch Batman v Superman, and not to say that any of that really qualifies me as someone to speak to it. You may say, well, Rebecca, that's not enough. You needed to go to film school to be a cinematographer to speak on those things. Fair, I guess. But when I watch Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, I drool over the cinematography. I wish I could shoot something that great. So when someone says that the technique in BVS is just awkwardly framed, show me the receipts. Tell me which frame you're talking about. Which aspect of it is awkwardly framed or has bad handheld camera work? I would like to know. This is so funny in these reviews because they can write whatever they want. They can write whatever they want. These reviews come out before the film, before anyone really has a chance to see it, which is funny because I saw BVS before these reviews came out. And so when the reviews came out, I was like, what are they talking about? But film critics can write anything they want because they're writing it before the film comes out. And after the film comes out, who cares anymore? What does it matter? They can write whatever they want and it's done. their viewpoint is out there, and it's going to sway people regardless of whether they actually read it or not, based on the title. Probably they're going to see the title and they're going to think whether or not it's a good movie based on the title, and they don't actually have to provide examples of anything they say. They don't have to back up anything they say. And so when I read that, I just want to ask them, I just want to ask Michael, what frames are you talking about? I would like to know. Please send me screenshots. I want to know which frames you think are awkward. I could point you to that film Spotlight that I can't remember if it won Oscars or whatever. It was supposed to be like cinema verite or whatever, truth in cinema or whatever. And it is terrible. It it is terrible in terms of cinematography. And I've had discussions with people where they were like, "Well, it's cinema verite, it's supposed to be just kind of in the moment or whatever happens happens." And I'm like, "Those are awkwardly framed shots. You watch that film and it's like nails on a chalkboard if you love camera work. It is just nails on a chalkboard because the shots are so bad. It's like somebody set up a camera and then they like knocked it over after they set it up, and the shot is just so bad because it's like partially staring at a wall. That's an awkwardly framed shot. You watch that film Spotlight, that's awkwardly framed because they just set up a camera and they just let it go. Who cares what the shot looks like? I promise you, go watch that film. It is awful to watch if you care about camera work. But that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to use that as an example of like something that maybe would be awkwardly framed. But BVS, I don't think here would be awkwardly framed. And I would I would love to know which shots that Michael here is referring to. But we will probably never know. So I guess we're just gonna have to go on his word here that is exactly how BVS is. It's just awkwardly framed and has bad handheld camera work. We're never gonna be able to engage in a discussion about that. All right, continuing on because I could rant about that forever. Let's get back into it. Okay. So Michael writes, quote, "Crucially, there's a new headliner in town, even if she's not yet playing the big room. Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman helps out in one of several climactic destruction festivals featured in Batman v Superman. Long before she actually suits up, though, you're good and sick of waiting for Godot to hijack all the ragey, steroidal, bone-crushing smackdowns, setting the tone in Snyder's literal blockbuster," unquote. So Michael refers to some of the action sequences in the film as, quote, "destruction festivals," unquote. Uh, does he mean like any fight in a superhero movie? Just like any superhero movie? Because they have destruction festivals in the Marvel movies. They have destruction festivals in superhero movies from the 80s. It's just part of being a superhero movie. But both of the big fights that Michael might be referring to here from BVS, namely the Batman and Superman fight, the big fight between the two of them, and then the Trinity versus Doomsday, both of those sequences take place in abandoned locations. So I'd be curious to know, does that make a difference? Yeah, buildings get destroyed, things get destroyed, but does it make a difference if it's an abandoned location? Or is Michael referring to the flashback to the Battle of Metropolis? I might give him points here. I might acknowledge that he has an argument there because there is a lot of destruction and there's consequences to that. People die in the Battle of Metropolis and buildings get smashed. People are threatened. And that's a big part of Bruce Wayne's motivation there. But I don't think they're destruction festivals to just be destruction festivals. I think they actually have a reason for being there and a reason to showcase, for example, two Kryptonians fighting each other. What would happen if Batman and Superman actually fought? Would Michael be more upset if Batman and Superman fought and it wasn't a destruction festival? Would you be let down if they didn't have a big, big fight to the death? I would. If it was supposed to be this big fight that everybody in the world had been wanting to see forever and ever, what would happen if Batman and Superman fought each other? That would be a letdown. I'm pretty sure if it hadn't had big stakes, especially if you go up against Doomsday and kill Superman, you want those things to be big and grand. So I guess I just don't understand the criticism because if they're going to have these characters, these superheroes fight each other and fight big monsters, there's gonna have to be some destruction that happens. There's no way that you can have something like that take place in a story and not have something be destroyed. You can't just go in there with kid gloves. Things have to fall, buildings have to be destroyed, things have to get blown up or, you know, broken. It's just the way of the storytelling of what that is. So I don't really understand the critique. Um, but that's what Michael is gonna go with. Let's see. I'm gonna stop down here and before I move on with the review and see if there's anything in the chat to address. Let's see. Yeah, Dennis says critics try to be as vague as possible so that people won't notice they're full of it. I think that's part of it because they can just write whatever they want to, and sometimes I wonder if they actually watch the film. Sometimes I think they're just maybe making some stuff up based on what they think is happening in the trailers. We've addressed some of these reviews that kind of seem like that's happening because they get everything wrong. But I think it's either they didn't watch the film, but they still have to write a review on it. And so they keep everything very vague so they don't get caught for being wrong. Or there's this whole bit in these reviews about how the Zack Snyder asked them not to spoil anything, so they have to be vague because they don't want to spoil it because Zack Snyder asked them to. You can still discuss a film without spoiling major plot points. I don't, that's not an excuse, but I think they would probably argue as to why it's so vague is because they don't want to spoil people. Let's see. Spider-Man says I have saved so many BBS screenshots. I know, it's so beautiful. I don't know if I've talked about it before on these live streams, but I had a friend of mine over one time at my house. We were actually working on some cosplay for Dragon Con. It was one of those things where, like, if you did it by yourself, you probably wouldn't be motivated to actually do it. But having somebody else, because I'm not a seamstress, so having somebody else there to help me, like if I had to, ask questions about how to make something or do something, it helps to have somebody else there to kind of be a sounding board. So we got together to work on some cosplay stuff. And she came over, and just while we were working, I put BVS on in the background because I knew it was a long film and it kind of just have some noise in the background to, kind of get us through it. And she looked up, and this is a person I had trained on camera to help me with some. I used to do wedding videos for friends of mine when I first got out of college because I had friends getting married and they wanted some cheap video work. And I was like, I'll do it for free. You're my friend. Which I'm sure people would say, Rebecca, you should have charged them for it. They were my really good friends. That was my gift to them. But I needed people to help me run camera for those things because I couldn't run all the cameras by myself. So I had a friend of mine who wanted to do it. And so I taught her a little bit about composition and framing and how to set up a shot and what to look for and how to make something good. And so she actually did a great job. But sometimes I'd look at her footage and I'd be like, oh, I hope she moves down. And then she would. And I was like, oh, good. She tilted down. She panned correctly. It was good. So I think I trained her pretty well on what to look for. And so while we were working on that cosplay stuff, she looked up at my TV, and it was during the opening sequence of the Wayne murders. And she she looked over at me and she goes, "Wow, that's gorgeous." And I was like, I know, right? So it was just one of those things where if you just had a little bit of knowledge about how to operate a camera or how to set up a shot, you would appreciate those kinds of things. So it's just strange to me that some of these reviewers who are people who are supposed to analyze films for a living don't seem to admit that those shots are really good. In fact, they say the opposite. They think it's bad. They think it's terrible, which is just it's mind blowing to me. Dennis also says, I think there was a scandal about a critic admitting that he didn't watch the movie he was reviewing. I think I've heard something similar. I could not tell you which film it was or who the critic was, but I've heard stories like that, and I honestly would be surprised that it happens. I think it happens more than we know. I just do. I've been trying to keep track of like some of the stuff that I've heard. I know there was a critic who admitted that with The Last Jedi, and I think it was on a podcast. I have to dig it up, but there was a critic who reviewed The Last Jedi, and the critic admitted that in order to keep in Disney's good graces, he had to write a glowing review of The Last Jedi. And I was like, wow, wow, admitted it just right there in his own words. So I'm going to have to dig that up. But I think those kinds of things happen, unfortunately, a lot with these reviews. That's why I'm really skeptical about a lot of this stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy things that are happening. All right, so let's get back into the review. So Michael goes on to write, quote, Affleck's adversary is played by Henry Cavill, who hit his green screen marks well enough in Snyder's 2013 Man of Steel, which is looking better every minute. Still, in a Batman v Superman, he's as narcissistic a Superman as you'll ever see. Cavill never should have taken on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., working on that project with director Guy Ritchie, perhaps the only successful contemporary filmmaker whose facility, does he mean faculty? It says whose facility with big screen action is more assaultive and aggravating than Snyder's. He seems to have crossed an invisible line of smugness from which it is difficult to return, unquote. Now, before I get into anything that I actually made notes on, I just want to talk about Guy Ritchie for a second. Guy Ritchie is actually one of my favorite filmmakers. He has a style of his own, and I think he takes a lot of risks with his films. I really loved his King Arthur film that he made. It's funny that it seems like a lot of these filmmakers who take a risk or have their own kind of style and their own perspective on things are the ones who are being thrown under the bus with these film critics. I think that's really, really interesting to me. I don't know. I guess it's, your taste. Maybe you're not a Guy Ritchie person. Maybe that kind of style of filmmaking is not up to your standards as a film critic. But I think it's just funny that this person has a real beef with Zack Snyder and a real beef with Guy Ritchie, and those two guys are some of my favorite filmmakers, which is so strange. But loves Christopher Nolan though, so I guess Michael gets points for that. All right, so going into what I actually wrote in my notes. It's amazing to me here that Michael writes that Superman is narcissistic, but never actually gives examples to back up that claim. It's another one of those things where Michael can just write whatever he wants to. And I guess, people haven't seen the film yet, so nobody can push back on what he writes. So the reader, before the reader goes to see BBS, is just going to go in thinking, gosh, Superman is narcissistic here. Oh my gosh, Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune was right. But there's nothing there. There are no examples used to back up that claim. I don't think that would have been a spoiler. I think Michael could have written about narcissistic Superman if that's what's in the film. But Michael doesn't seem to expand on this thought here. Just writes that Superman is narcissistic. But how is he that way in Batman v Superman? Is he that way? How is Clark in love with himself? A narcissist is someone who is in love with himself. How does he display egoism and pride? A narcissist does that, displays egoism and pride. If anything, I think Superman demonstrates lots of humility when he appears before the Senate hearing to answer their questions. He demonstrates humility by retreating to the wintry mountains to think in solitude while the world condemns him. He considers what people in the news say about him, even though it's tough for him to hear. He sets aside Batman trying to murder him and takes up Batman's offer for Batman to save his mother. And he dies saving the world from an unkillable monster in Doomsday. If anything, I think Clark and Superman and Batman v Superman are the exact opposite of narcissistic. So I would be curious as to why Michael thinks that Superman is narcissistic. Maybe it's the nightmare Superman. Maybe Michael's confused about the nightmare sequence. Maybe he thinks the anti-life Superman is the narcissistic Superman. Maybe he Michael didn't understand the visual imagery in the Day of the Dead sequence. Maybe like a lot of people I know that I've argued with on Twitter in the past, thought the Day of the Dead was literal depiction of things that were happening, and misunderstanding that the sort of the sepia tone kind of imagery was actually humanity's perspective on Superman, how they saw Superman. Maybe people didn't understand that and thought that, a Superman hovering above the family in the flood was Superman like growling at them. Maybe maybe I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't know what Michael thinks that Superman is being narcissistic about. So I'm just having to like come up with things. I don't know. But he's just not narcissistic in Batman v Superman. That's a lie. It's just a lie. Let's see. I'm gonna hop into the chat here really quickly. Okay, let's see. Dennis says Superman is so narcissistic that he gives his life to save his loved ones. Yeah. So strange. And Dennis also says, if anything, Clark's flaws are that he is way too humble for his own good. Yeah, it's so bizarre. Why would anybody make that claim? All right, going back into the review, Michael writes, quote, having killed thousands of innocent bystanders at the end of Man of Steel, high-flying alien Superman is now considered a pariah by many. Batman, meanwhile, has hardened into a boozy sociopath, a criminal, says Wayne himself, who wants to murder the alien invader with the S as badly as Lex Luthor, played by a skittery, occasionally amusing Jesse Eisenberg. Luthor wants to destroy them both, unquote. So I guess maybe Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor is another one of those things that kept PBS from being a total drag. It seems like maybe Michael enjoyed Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. Okay, so Superman didn't kill thousands of innocent bystanders in Man of Steel. General Zod initiated those attacks and was the one who wanted to kill all the people. Superman only killed one person in that film, and that was General Zod, to stop him from heat visioning a family of 4 to death. So I don't think it's fair to say that Superman killed thousands of people. He tried to stop it as much as he could. So I don't think that is an argument made in good faith. Also, Michael neglects to mention here that while some in the film consider Superman a, quote, pariah, unquote, others are actually arguing in favor of him. Metropolis has built a statue in his honor. A reporter on the TV news in the film calls it a, quote, a beloved monument, unquote. People at the Capitol are divided, with some loving Superman and some hating him. It's a bit of a mixed bag for Superman, but he's not a complete pariah. There are some people in the world of Metropolis and in the world itself who actually like what Superman's doing. In this review, Michael is painting a picture that everyone hates Superman, and that's just simply not the case. There's a lot of debate around Superman, but there are some people who love him and some who don't. But Michael doesn't point out that there are people who do love Superman and who do appreciate what he's doing in the film. Michael points out here that Batman has a lot of problems, and he does. That's true. He calls him a sociopath. I think there's some traits that Batman or Bruce have in the film that maybe could diagnose him that way. But there's one trait of sociopaths that I don't think apply to Bruce Wayne. Bruce does have empathy for others. That's why he saves the ladies from human trafficking. That's why he saves the people during the Battle of Metropolis. That's why he makes the choice to save Martha Kent. I think Batman probably fits other traits as, being a sociopath. But the empathetic nature of Bruce Wayne, even during this time of revenge, seems like a pretty thing to mention here. So I think the fact that it's neglected is Michael trying to sway the audience to think that Batman's just this terrible character, when even during his ragey revenge times, he's still trying to help people. What I think is interesting about Michael's descriptions of Batman and even his parallel to Lex Luthor is that they are mentioned, but they are never explored any further. Talking about the similarities and differences between Bruce and Lex and BVS would actually make for a good review and a good read, but Michael doesn't seem all that interested in writing an analysis of the film. You could write a whole review just based on the fact that Bruce and Lex are paralleled in the film to a great degree, but really what sets them apart is what they choose to think about Superman by the end of the film, and what they choose to do when they are presented with the opportunity to kill Superman. Let's see. But I think really the intention here is not to actually do an analysis of the film. Michael laid out pretty early on in this review that he's more interested in trying to sway the future actions of the studio. So that seems to be the intent of this review. So there is that. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. I think there's a lot of discussion about Superman and whether or not he uh, killed those people, and I think it's just an unfair thing for people to say about Superman. And I know it's something that's thrown about quite a bit, but Superman just he didn't kill anybody except for General Zod there at the end. Uh, them's the facts. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, so to continue on, Michael writes, quote, an hour into Batman v Superman, you wonder, can we just settle this little spat and move on to Gadot's Wonder Woman movie, unquote. So it does seem like Gal Gadot is another thing in the film that is keeping BVS from being a total drag. There are a lot of things adding up to keeping the film from being a total drag. He liked Alfred. He liked Lois. He liked Wonder Woman. He liked Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. So it's interesting that he continues to focus in on the negative aspects of the film instead of talking about all these things that actually kept it from being a bad film and actually made it a good film. So I think there's a little bias here, but I guess at least there are some things that he's pointing out as objectively things that were good about the film, even though Michael clearly hated the film. There are some aspects that it seems like he did like. Continuing on, Michael writes, quote, in the comic book superhero universe, be it DC or Marvel or an outlier, each new franchise cycle divides audiences between those who appreciate the dark, nasty stuff, quality issues aside, and the nostalgists who'd rather take it easy and have what the old folks call a good time. The action in most superhero outings dives headlong, Frank Miller Sin City style, into the muck and depravity of the modern world, whether it's dramatically satisfying or not, unquote. Now, I do think that films like BVS divide an audience into two groups, but not in the way that Michael thinks. Rather, I think the two groups are the two groups that C.S. Lewis mentions in his film in his book titled An Experiment in Criticism. I highly recommend that book by C.S. Lewis, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of this project that I'm doing here with these BVS reviews. But just to tease it out, the two groups that C.S. Lewis mentions are the first group, the few, and the second group that he calls the many. I'll expand on this idea in a wrap-up video that I'm going to do on this series that I'm doing here in this project. But if you'd like to do a little reading on your own in the meantime to kind of get more of a sense of what I'm going to be talking about, I highly recommend that you check out the C.S. Lewis book titled An Experiment in Criticism. And I think when you do read that book, as I have been doing, the few and the many becomes very clear as to what separates people who like Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice and people who don't. It's really interesting the way that C.S. Lewis outlines it in terms of art criticism and why those two groups exist. So I do think the BVS divides people into two groups, but I don't think it's exactly the way that Michael here in his review is mentioning them. I'm also curious, why is Frank Miller's Sin City mentioned here? The only connections it has to BVS is that Batman v Superman borrowed ideas and imagery from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, and that both films are adapting comic book stories. Other than that, not much in common. Sin City, great film though. So also, one thing, another question that I have is, why is it a bad thing to get into the muck and depravity of the modern world? Why is it a bad thing to explore those ideas? Because I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I think actually using superheroes to uh, dive into those ideas and to explore the muck and depravity of the modern world, I think is actually a good use of superheroes. So I think it's weird that Michael seems to think that that's a bad thing. Okay, so continuing on, Michael writes, quote, the Batman v Superman script by Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer plows familiar ground for much of its 153 minutes. The runtime. It's so long. A 2.5 hour movie is so long. Oh no. Revisiting the brutal murder of Bruce Wayne's parents and starting off where Man of Steel ended, with Superman and General Zod leveling much of Metropolis, which saved our planet long term, but piled up a lot of unseen corpses in the short term. Batman is epically miffed. And while Eisenberg's Luthor develops a precious hunk of kryptonite for his own genocidal purposes, the big boys inch closer, often in Snyder's preferred hackneyed slow mo to the battle royale, unquote. I know I've mentioned it on live streams before, and I hate to repeat myself, but BVS has a little of Zack Snyder's trademark speed ramping. There's not much of it in the film at all. I don't know why the slow-mo is mentioned here and why it's such an issue for Michael in reviewing this film. There are very few cases of it. I think one of the live streams that I did before, I talked about how there's a little bit of speed ramping in the initial meeting between Superman and Batman, where Superman kicks the Batmobile. The use of the Batmobile in that sequence has a little speed ramping in it, but it's very limited compared to other Zack Snyder films like Sucker Punch or even Zack Snyder's Justice League, where speed ramping comes back into play. There's not much of it there. It's just not much of it. So I don't know why he mentioned Zack Snyder's hackneyed slow mo. There's not much of it at all. Let's see. Continuing on, he writes, quote, Diane Lane returns as the widowed Martha Kent, here abducted by Slavic dastards and threatened with blowtorch, disfigurement, and death. What is this, Taken or Saw? A terrorist bombing on a major DC landmark is just another tasteless, ill-timed gotcha moment. Human trafficking intimations of child abuse, I'm having a hard time saying abuse. Child abuse. Luthor mutters about suffering his father's fist and abominations. A hollowed out Superman resigning himself to the notion that no one stays good in this world. The film is only slightly more pessimistic than Lars von Trier's Antichrist. You'd have to go back to Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ to find this much Christian iconography wedded to this much sadism, unquote. I have a lot of questions about this section of the review. The first one is, why couldn't a writer put Martha Kent in a situation where she is threatened to be blowtorched to death? Why couldn't somebody write that? Especially if you don't see it happen. It's not like they're trying to be graphic and overly violent. I think it's perfectly fine to threaten Martha Kent with that. I think it's a bad choice if you actually did torture to death, because you want to see a heroic moment, especially like with the Martha rescue, where Batman actually does save her from being blowtorched to death. I think that's the better choice. But I don't think it's a problem to actually put Martha Kent in a situation where she's being threatened. I think that sets up the possibility for heroism and a rescue, and that's what we get. And I think that's the right choice. So I don't think it's a problem to actually threaten Martha Kent with being blowtorched to death, especially since it doesn't happen and we never see it. I think that would have maybe more criticism to actually do that. That would actually be more like Saw or like Taken. But because we never see it happen, and because it's a way for Batman to be the hero in the moment, I think that's perfectly fine. Let's see. So is the bombing of the Capitol just a gotcha moment, or does it actually have more meaning to the story? That would be my next question. Is it Lex Luthor making a point about the American government who refused to give him what he wanted? Does it reinforce Luthor's worldview of questioning whether, quote, power can be innocent, unquote? Is his framing of Superman to be responsible for the Capitol bombing trying to get others to believe that Superman and all of his power cannot be innocent? Is he trying to show that Lex considers himself above the United States government? Uh, why is it that just in asking some of those questions that I, just a simple lover of films, am able to dig a little deeper and find more meaning into the bombing than a professional film critic who gets paid to write these reviews? To me, that's lazy. It's lazy for someone should just see that sequence as just a gotcha moment. There's way more going in that sequence with the characters, with the setup, with the themes that are going through the film than just, oh, it's a gotcha moment. That's lazy. It's lazy. I'm sorry. It's just lazy. Also getting into this section of the review, Michael believes that BVS is a pessimistic film, but never mentions Bruce Wayne's speech at the end of the film that refutes everything that he's written in this paragraph. You can't say that it's pessimistic when the end of the film has a changed Bruce Wayne who is now a new man who now believes that men can be better, that we can be that we don't have to give in to the revenge and the meanness and the killing and the murder. We can be a better people. That's how the film ends. How is that pessimistic? It's so strange to me. At least, though, Michael picked up on the Christian iconography. I don't know how you would miss it, but some people do. But sadly, he didn't understand it and didn't understand that the change to Bruce Wayne is directly the change in Bruce Wayne's perspective from being a villain and a person bent on revenge and a murderer and a sociopath, as Michael described him, that he's changed. Why is he changed? Maybe it has something to do with that Christian iconography that's in the film. Batman has an encounter with a Christ figure, and seeing his sacrifice and metaphorical crucifixion, there's actually an intentional descent from the cross moment that's in that sequence. There are crosses in the sequence when he dies. There's an intentional metaphorical crucifixion that changes Bruce Wayne and causes him to become a new creature, a new man. And he becomes a person who is driven by hope that we see later on in Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's far from being pessimistic. That's one of the most hopeful things in the world. So this is one of those things where I don't think the review that's being written is written in good faith. It's not actually telling the reader the full story of this film. So if you actually read this review, you didn't see Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, you would come away from the review thinking it was a pessimistic, horrible film, when actually it's probably, in my opinion, one of the most hopeful superhero films that has ever been made, and maybe one of the most hopeful films ever made, period. Maybe some people would say that's a bold statement. I think it would just be an accurate and true one. But if you just read this review based on Michael's thoughts, you would have a completely different outlook on this film without actually having to see what the film actually puts forward, that it's actually a very optimistic and hopeful film that wants people to be better and wants to show that people can change and be better, and they don't have to be kind of the sinful fallen people that they are for most of their lives. They can be changed. They can change their ways. They can be better. And that's a really hopeful outlook and a worldview. And so I don't think Michael's quite telling the whole story of the film. Continuing on in the review, he writes, quote, Snyder is not without skills or ideas. Okay, well, that's that's a good acknowledgement. But when a critic finds himself at odds with almost every aspect of a director's visual approach to material like this becomes pretty joyless. Compare the first big sequence in Batman v Superman featuring the Batmobile in action to the Batcycle / semi-trailer truck game of chicken in Nolan's The Dark Knight. Again, with the Dark Knight comparisons. I'm going to keep going. The latter builds beautifully and shows off the toys and old fashioned non digital effects with serious class. The Batman v Superman equivalent is pure empty noise. Fireballs, the usual overdose of insane automatic gunfire, and absolutely no rhythm, unquote. Okay, so Michael writes, quote, Snyder is not without skills or ideas, but when a critic finds himself at odds with almost every aspect of a director's visual approach. You see, dear reader and dear viewer of this live stream, Michael would have made this film differently. And because Michael would have made this film differently, therefore the film is bad and it is joyless and it is no good. I think that's so funny. Because this film is not how I would have made it, it is a bad film. What a terrible way to review a film, in my opinion. Yeah, there are a lot of films that I watch and I think, I wouldn't have done it like that. But that doesn't mean it's a bad film. It just means it's something I would have done differently. That's not actually reviewing the film for what it actually is. It's just saying, well, I wanted the film to be the way I wanted the film to be, which is not an actual review of the film. Um, that's so funny to me that just because you would have done it a little differently, that means it's bad. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. Michael does another comparison to the Dark Knight trilogy here for some reason. Again, they are two different interpretations with different goals and perspectives for and on the character of Batman. There's no reason they should be the same. In fact, I would have been disappointed if both films had the same approach. I would want them to be reflective of the director and their perspective and the way that each director wanted to tell those different stories. And in my opinion, this is another example of how Michael's kind of just on the surface being very superficial and not actually looking at the story that it's telling or the character of Batman and what he's going through in the moment when the sequence is happening. Because if you actually analyze the film as the film and actually look at the merits of the film, the reason that BVS contains a more aggressive Batmobile sequence compared to The Dark Knight is because this is showing us where Batman is as a character. He's a more aggressive Batman at this point. In this sequence, he's still in revenge mode. He actually is so angry that at the end of the sequence, he encounters Superman for the first time, and he sort of threatens they come to blows, and they don't get along, and so that's where Batman is at this point. He's still angry about everything. This is an angry, vengeful Batman. So of course he's going to be different from the Dark Knight trilogy. Of course the Batmobile is going to be treated a little differently. It has its own kind of personality and goes with whatever the Batman is that it's tied to and what the Batman is going through in that scene. So of course it's going to act a little differently as a character. The Batmobile is a little bit of a character in itself. And so I think the interpretation and the different kind of story that it's telling about Bruce Wayne and Batman in BVS is going to be different from the Dark Knight trilogy. Of course they would be different. Okay, so just to wrap up, we're almost to the end. So Michael ends this review quoting, you don't owe this world a thing, Lane tells Superman at one point. Maybe so. But at this point in the twinned mythologies of two extremely hardy DC heroes, humankind deserves a better blockbuster, unquote. Now, if I was Michael's editor on this last paragraph, I would have clarified on who the Lane is referring to. It could have been confusing for the reader. There is a Diane Lane as the actress in the film playing Martha Kent, and there's a Lois Lane, the character that Amy Adams plays. It could be confusing to the reader who hasn't seen the film or that scene in particular when Diane Lane as Martha Kent says that to Superman. In my opinion, nothing in this review makes a strong case for why Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice isn't a good blockbuster. I think that's the thesis that Michael is trying to put forth here, but I don't think he's built a strong case for it. And in the last sentence, is that another Nolan reference to the Dark Knight? In that film, Joker says the line, this town deserves a better class of criminals. So it makes me think that he's ending on another reference to the Dark Knight, which again is really pointless and does nothing to actually engage with the merit of the film that he's reviewing. All right, so I'm gonna hop back into some of the chat to see if there are any comments that I need to address. Dennis says that sadism sounds just like your average day in comic books. Yeah, I mean, comic books have action. They have fights. That's what happens in comic books. That's what happens in superhero films based on those comic books. I don't know what Michael here is expecting. Let's see. Dennis also says BBS is hopeful in the same way as Rocky or Darkest Tower. It shows that hope shines through even the bleakest moments. To me, and I've made the case for that in one of my videos about Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which I based around the idea of hope. Is that's what I argue as well. You can't experience hope, in my opinion, unless you go down to the pits, and unless you're in the kind of the bleakest, darkest points of your life. That's when I've experienced hope the most, is when I felt like I didn't have any hope, and then that's when the hope and the light shines through. And I think that's what BBS does really well, is that the hope comes out of Superman's death. You see the people change, you see Bruce Wayne change, and you see that there are people who have hope and pass on that hope to each other with if you seek his monument, look around you, they all become Superman. They want to be Superman in Superman's absence. And that's gosh darn hopeful, if you ask me. And real analysis makes the same kind of case there as well. Hope is most needed and most meaningful in the bleakest moments. Yeah, I think the film and the thematic element of hope in BVS is done really well, in terms of Superman representing that on his chest through the S shield, and the fact that Doomsday skewers Superman through the S, essentially killing hope, seemingly killing hope, but hope still survives even after the death of Superman. So I think BBS actually is a very hopeful movie and not a pessimistic one like Michael claims that it is. But I think that's going to do it for this week's live stream and our reading of this review from the Chicago Tribune. If you missed this live, I hope you'll consider sharing your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you have any questions about when I'll be live, just check this YouTube channel, youtube.com/duckmilkprod. Duck Milk Prod. I'll be scheduling live streams in advance when I'm available. I'm hoping to be a little bit more consistent on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. I've had to take some time back because a lot of things been going on in my life, but I hope to be more regular for the next couple of weeks, regular and consistent with these live streams, and really get back at it. If you have a BBS review that you'd like to share, we talk about the BBS reviews, and maybe don't do such a great job. But if you have one that you think really knocks it out of the park and has some meaningful things to share, please pass them along. You can put them in the comment section below. I think sometimes people have been having a little bit of a trouble actually putting links in the comments. So maybe write something out, maybe do a little description, then try to link it and see if that works, and not just put just a link by itself. It doesn't seem like YouTube takes those. But if you have a link that you want to share, please let me know. I'd be happy to pass it along. And one of my regular viewers, David, sent over a link to me to the YouTube channel called Style is Substance. And there's a review and an analysis of Zack Snyder's Watchmen film over there that David wanted me to check out. And I watched it, and I agree. I think it's one that everybody should watch. So if you want to check that out from Style is Substance, the video link is in the video description below this live stream. So definitely check that out. It was one of those things where when I just read the channel titles, like Style is Substance, and I was like, yes, that's it. That's the best way to describe that. A lot of people make the case that Zack Snyder is style over substance, but that channel and in that video, it makes the case for the fact that the style is the substance. That when you actually see the shots and the way the cinematography is done and the lighting and the camera choice, even the camera choices and the lens and everything about the way everything that's in the frame that is the substance. It's telling you something visually about the story and about the characters, and not just telling you through the dialogue and through the speeches. It's actually communicating the substance through the visuals. And that's something that I love about Zack Snyder's work. And I think it's a great video. So definitely check it out because the style is the substance. Agreed. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this reading review with Rebecca. So I'm going to hand it over to voiceover Rebecca, and she's going to wrap up this live stream. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at @TheDerbyKid and on Vero at DerbyKid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTV Podcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.